next slide.
All right.
We'll share it. We're just winging it here.
Little team action. So, yes, it's
Sell your good or service to the Government of Canada. So, as Chris mentioned, we are one of the largest buyers of goods and services in Canada. We typically buy between $15 and $20 billion of goods and services a year, and that is over, there's over 100 government departments that we are purchasing for. So the opportunities for contracts range from hundreds of dollars to billions of dollars. And as we often say, we buy everything from toilet paper to fighter jets. So when you think about some of the departments that we service, we buy for prisons, all of our correctional institute, we buy for our military, which both are departments that require like a full gamut of things, as well as all the other departments. So an interesting fact is that small and medium enterprises received almost 90% of the 7,700 contracts awarded to suppliers in Canada last year. So I will let Chris do the next slide.
all right.
We'll share it. We're just winging it here.
Little team action. So, yes, it's before joining this office, I was managing a team of 23 buyers across Calgary, Saskatoon, and Regina. And to Robin's point about Correction Services Canada and Department of National Defence, some of the bigger contracts that we were managing through that team were food contracts. We need to feed soldiers and we need to feed prisoners.
Different menus.
And so,
Hey.
this is live.
Yeah.
And yes, and the billions of dollars will fluctuate, certainly. So as we were saying, the way it operates, okay, is that we are, particularly in the Western region, okay, the region that we cover is Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Northwest Territories, and Nunavut. That is our region that we cover, and it's a region that our buyers in this area cover. We do mass majority of our contracts on behalf of other government departments. We actually buy very little for ourselves. It's all for them. And it is an extremely wide range that we do that. And the way that works is the government department that needs something will essentially create a requirement, then they send it to us, okay? They fill out a form. We got a lot of forms. We're trying to electronic that thing. But anyway, they fill out a form, they send it to us, and then we do the procurement and make sure that the rules are abided by. The fundamental around government procurement at the federal level is open, fair, transparent. That is how we operate. And it really, really defines the rules that we play by. One of the biggest discussions that we end up having is around communication. Communication during a solicitation. And our rules are very, very, very strict and very straightforward on that. Is that if there is a solicitation out on the street and you have a question about it, you're going to either call or email that question. We are not going to answer you straight away, because the open, fair, and transparent part of that communication is that we have to take that question, get the answer, get it translated, and then post it publicly for everyone to see. That is the level that we hold open, fair, and transparent, because we want to make sure that everybody is aware of what question was asked and everybody is aware of what answer was given, so that one person doesn't think they got an answer over somebody else, or a different version of the answer if we were answering all these questions independently. So that's kind of the level that we play at, which is quite challenging. Having said that about requirements from a federal government department, everything we do is really based on levels, okay? And the authority levels are dollar amounts. And this becomes really important because depending on what your particular business is. Government departments, for the most part, all have up to $25,000 to buy on their own. We at Public Services and Procurement Canada, we will never see those. Ever, ever, ever. They are done on their own. So it's really important, and the example I like to use in this area is training. We love to do training in the government. We need training for our people, without question. Whether it's
Not
team
us.
building, well, no, but whether it's team building, whether it is Microsoft Excel training, it could be anything. But the reality of the training contract that's likely to be put in place, let's say it's personality insights training on work styles, that's a one-day training. That is not going to be anywhere close to $25,000. So from Public Services and Procurement Canada standpoint, we're not going to see that, and that is not ever going to be posted publicly. So one of the tools, and we're going to get into some tools. Am I ahead of myself?
No, I just wanted to mention that terminology, you often hear a lot of terminology thrown around in government. So the term for, although $25,000 to me is a lot of money, you will often hear the term low value procurement. And low value procurement refers to anything under $25,000.
Very good point, because you will see that. And that's really only in comparison to fighter jets. So yes, where are we?
Well, so up to $25,000 is the department and two other exceptions.
Right. So services can be up to $2 million with a government department in which they'll run their own. Those will be posted publicly though. They will be seen. Okay. Construction is also up to $400,000 in which the department will do their own. Again, over the dollar amount, over $25,000, it'll still be posted publicly. So there's two things here when it comes to tools, okay? And we're going to get to one of them right now. The first tool is our website called buyandsell.gc.ca. We're going to share this information with you. We have some pamphlets and things to share with you.
Yeah, and I believe we have everybody's, or almost everybody's email, and if you haven't provided it, we'd love to have it so we can send an email afterwards with the important links and also a survey, of course, to see how we did. But
Classic.
more importantly for you, the link. So buyandsell.gc.ca. If you came away from this session with one thing that was burned into your memory, it's buyandsell.gc.ca. That's where you start.
It is quite a site. And what I mean is by that is there is piles upon piles upon piles of information in there. Okay? When you first open it up, just as a warning, it may look a bit overwhelming. Just simply because there is information for government, there's information for businesses, there's all of our policies and procedures you can read upon. You can look up our contracting policies, rules, regulations. It is all in there because it is all public knowledge and public information. But what's most important is all of our opportunities over $25,000 get posted there. And it is actually quite good for searchability. So if you go to the site and you click on active and you put in a search term, it is going to bring up all the different opportunities that are available. So if you are in training courses, or if you sell honey, if we have a contract out to buy honey, it is going to be in there if it's over $25,000. And so that's a great place to start. There's another way I really like to discuss when it comes to using that website. Because depending on what you sell, although we buy a lot, we don't buy everything. And so I've had conversations with businesses, one in particular based out of Manitoba, where they manufactured really, really, really specific pieces of equipment. Essentially, if you had a machine and you had something break in the machine that was really specific, they could manufacture it for you. We're not going to buy those one little things. So what we did is we had a conversation about, okay, you make parts, you can make special parts for these end products. If you know the end products, search the companies that we're buying from, because all of the contracts, not the details of the contracts, but who we contracted with is in there as well. And so sometimes it's about getting into the supply chain. You may not be a direct supplier just because of the nature of what you actually sell, but you might be able to find out who we buy from and get into their supply chain, and now you're an indirect supplier to the Government of Canada, which creates other great opportunity.
mean, we have contracted, I've seen a contract on there for ice cream, because we buy ice cream for our soldiers. If it was a commodity like honey, that we didn't necessarily buy $25,000 worth of honey, but you may be able to find one of our food suppliers, and you can see who they are, and then you can contact them to see if they're willing to buy your product, which then becomes part of that larger contract to the government.
Exactly. So a couple of different ways to look at that website when you're looking for active opportunities or opportunities that have closed, some that we've already awarded, and what we're actually buying and what may be connected to your business. Before I get to that, I just want to, the other thing to do, okay, is we have a website. It's the Government Electronic Directory Service. That's kind of like the government phone book, okay, the online. But better, right. And the reason I bring that one up is because if the contract, if you work and sell something that's in the world of under $25,000 and we're never going to see it and it's not ever going to get posted publicly, that is another mechanism. It's kind of like banging on doors, okay, of the government virtually, and it probably takes a whole bunch of knocks, I'm not going to lie. But there are decision makers, okay, going back to the training example, there are decision makers that are going to make the decision in that department to do that training and to make them aware of you. Hey, I'm in Edmonton, I do this. I met someone in Edmonton at a conference a couple months ago. She actually participated. She took us through laughter yoga. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of laughter yoga. She took the entire group through laughter yoga. It is like nothing I've ever experienced before. We had a great conversation afterwards about getting contracts with the government. Can she provide this service to the government of Canada? We met at that conference. So I'm sorry, I totally distracted. So it was a great conversation because what we talked about is that Government Electronic Directory Service and who to try and knock on in the departments, like who is based, what departments are in Edmonton, and then finding people in there. What ended up happening, she ended up getting a contract right before Christmas with one of the departments. So it did work, it can happen, and it's a great tool, and it's a way to use that tool as well.
Because the way GEDS, as we call it for short, the Government Electronic Directory Service, the way it is organized is that basically not only does it provide the name and position of all the people, most people in the government, but it also shows what department they work in, who else is on their team, and the hierarchy right back to the top of their department. So let's say, and you can use keyword search too. So let's say we're searching for something like yoga. So we might do something in human resources or some sort of other keyword that we were looking for in wellness. Might put wellness in, and it's going to pop up. Oh, look, there's Jane Doe, who is the wellness coordinator in the so-and-so department. Not only can I see Jane Doe's information, but I can also see who else is on her team and who her supervisor is. So if it's not necessarily the right person, immediately you can figure out, okay, who in that group might I talk to, might I send information to? And the nice thing about this is all this information that we're telling you is not a secret. I mean, they're great tips and not everybody knows them, but if you go on to buy and sell, there is a section for businesses, and this is covered under how to promote yourself. All these links and whatnot are there because it really is, the government, just like anybody else, is a client. And you're selling your product and we're a potential client, and all those departments are as well. So you just have to sell yourself to them just like you would sell to any other potential client.
All right, excellent. Well done. Well done. Yes. Two great tools to use for research and for finding opportunity. One of the key things, all right, and there's, of course, we're the federal government. We have process. And so one of the things about process is that in order to be a supplier to the government of Canada, we need you to register as a supplier to the government of Canada. That process is not so bad. It gets you into our supplier registry. It gets you what's called a procurement business number, okay? And for any solicitation, to bid on a solicitation and to receive a contract, that number is a must. We have to have that procurement business number. So if you are considering, and if you're looking at opportunities, you see something on buy and sell, you want to consider doing something with and being a supplier with us, one of the number one first things to do is go through the supplier registration process and get yourself registered and get yourself a procurement business number.
What are we talking, Chris? 20 minutes?
Yeah, it's not long.
Not much.
Fortunately, it's not long, okay? And if there's any support needed for that, this is what we do during the day. We come do this at night, and then during the day we answer questions about how to get registered and et cetera, okay?
And I will say too that even if you are not immediately considering selling to the Government of Canada, registering as a supplier is important because it helps us understand what markets are out there in our territory and what suppliers exist out there. So when other departments will come to us and say, hey, do you have anybody, like what kind of construction people do you have out there? We can look and say, okay, we have these suppliers of construction services. So even if you're not immediately selling, it's still great to have you registered as a supplier. It doesn't commit you to anything. It's just saying, hey, you're out there. And that way you're counted.
I'm just finding comfortable about all this stuff.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the thing about we're trying to do the presentation, but follow it, but then we just get talking and then realize, oh, wait.
We just want to cut to the good stuff.
Because of course it's government, so they gave us a 66 slide deck to cover in 45 minutes.
Then you have to have them.
Which, as
You have to have them cut
I
it
talk,
down.
and that's just never gonna happen.
I just keep pressing the next one.
It's just never gonna happen. Finding opportunities, open data, contacting data, current.
We did that.
Yeah.
We covered that.
Okay. All right. This is
You
me,
go.
I think, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, when you start going looking at opportunities, we fundamentally use 4 really different methods of procurement. Okay, tools, if you'll say. All right. We have contracts. Okay, or I should say, we'll talk from the solicitation standpoint because that's what you're going to see first. A solicitation. We are going to go up. We're going to get a requirement from a government department. We, as public service in Canada, put all the documents together, make sure it's open, fair, transparent. We make sure as much as we can with the knowledge that we have about the industry that the requirement is generic so it opens up as much competition as possible. And then we go, and once we package that all together, we post it on buy and sell. Okay?
Example, chair.
Examples, chairs.
Okay, so the chair, the department says, hey, we need like 50 new chairs. And we're like, great, tell us what you need in a chair. Like, well, it has to have a back, and it has to have armrests, and it has to be adjustable up and down. So that's what we put together, help them put together and decide what they need. And more, as I've been learning from Chris, we're trying to get away from saying we need a blue chair, and more saying we need a chair that inspires creativity. So that, because departments all sometimes have like an idea in mind of the product they want to get, and we're trying to steer them away from that and get a product that meets their needs. So that's something the government is working towards.
Yes, well said. Trying to get away from highly technical to more performance-based.
That's mine. I'll just
Oh.
shuffle over here.
That's good too.
Carry on.
And so, by doing so, we essentially are trying to get to a point where we talk about what's our problem, what's our issue, right? Here's our issue, please solve it for us, rather than us writing something very, very technical, which is essentially already the solution and you giving us a price for it. That's part of the requirements. With the actual solicitations, we're going to have one of 4 things. We're going to do an invitation to tender. We're going to do a request for proposal. We can do a request for standing offer and a request for supply arrangement. Okay, those are essentially the 4 that we do. Okay, invitation to tender is used most often in something where we're really just asking for a price. Okay, that very specific thing. Here it is. We do it a lot in, believe it or not, a lot in construction. And those become open tenders, and it's basically open up, read, and it's it. There's very little to evaluate. It's very, very set in what it is.
Like paper, would that be a good example?
Unfortunately, no.
Oh,
Sorry.
I didn't know paper could be so varied.
It's a standing offer.
Okay.
So they're really the ITT, the invitation and tenders really set on in that construction field. The request for proposal is something where we have most of the solution, but we need a little feedback as well. It's something where we're not only just going to evaluate the price, we're also going to evaluate some technical criteria. So we may evaluate experience. We may evaluate the technical capability of the product. There's more to the evaluation than just the price, okay? The result of a request for proposal is a contract, okay? A set contract over a set period of time with a set deliverable is how that plays out. The other two that we're gonna get into are tools that we use. A standing offer and a supply arrangement. A standing offer is something where we go out and say, we need paper.
Yes, okay.
Okay?
My example lives.
Yes, it does. Yeah, absolutely does. We need paper. And the government means, as much as we're going digital, we still need paper. So we need paper, but we don't know how much paper we need, and we don't know how often. So what we set up is a standing offer. The standing offer essentially sets all terms and conditions and all prices ahead of time. It's going to put all the rules in place, but there is no actual commitment from the government as to how much we're going to buy. It is going to be kind of open. We put an estimate so that businesses understand what's possible, but no formal commitment to actual dollars. Because often when we're talking about budgets in the government, they don't know a year in advance. They get their budgets, if the government changes, the budgets change, priorities change, we don't know. So it's very difficult to have departments commit. And so what we'll have is sometimes we'll have a standing offer with one business, or sometimes we'll have a standing offer with multiple businesses. It all depends on the volume. So paper being an example, we need a lot of volume, and we need it across every department all across the country. So is there a large organization or a large business that could handle all that volume? Probably. But what we do in that case is we actually set it up on purpose to have multiple suppliers. And often we break them down regionally. So there'll be a regional supplier base for paper in Alberta, there'll be a regional supplier base for paper in BC, and each way across the country. And so what it does is when the department then needs to get some paper, they don't have to go through the entire contracting process. It's already set in place. They essentially put in an order, and the terms and conditions of that standing offer, the supplier abides by. So if delivery is in 4 days from when you get the order, you deliver in 4 days at the price that was established at when we did it in the outset. So essentially it sets all the rules in place, and when we need something, we say, here you go, and you give it to us.
And I would like to take this opportunity to do a tangent
Please.
about a great small business story related to stationery supplies.
Love it.
So, I mean, it gets exciting. We're excited. Yeah.
Let's see.
So, often, small and medium-sized businesses sometimes feel like maybe they're at a disadvantage to some of these larger suppliers. Take, for example, stationery. We can all think of a couple companies that rhyme with Naples or some other ones that, seem like they might have some of the upper hand in some of these supply arrangements. However, in standing offers, so in this particular example, we had a smaller company out in New Brunswick, a mom and pop shop that did stationery supplies. Well, they got onto one of these standing offers, and I'll tell you, some of the departments that are out in that area, they were having the bigger suppliers because they were feeling they weren't getting the customer service. They would just get on the same phone line as everybody else and try and make their same complaints. There'd be mistakes in the orders, and they weren't getting that same quality of service. They tried using this smaller operation, and they were so satisfied because the small business was able to deliver customer service that they needed to conduct their everyday, day-to-day business. They were responsive to their needs, and they've continued to have them as one of their main suppliers. So it's just a great story of how a smaller business can really play when there's this type of regional standing offer.
But the question is here, like when you are doing it, you are bidding for not only on the base of service, you're bidding also on the cost of the product too. So if I have to buy the same paper thing, if I have to provide you a bid for paper, I still have to buy for Grand & Toy or Staples. So they are keeping the margin, I have to keep my margin. I can compete on a service, but I will lose on cost then.
Yes, and so, yes, understandable. It's a very, very good point. When we set up a multi-supplier standing offer, we actually have certain ways in which we allocate the actual columns, the actual orders. We can do it as right of first refusal. So whoever is number one, which typically in a paper environment is going to be lowest price. So if it's right of first refusal, we go to them. If they say no, we go to the next, we go to the next. Sometimes we do it by proportion. So 60% of the business volume would go to the lowest bidder, 20% to the next, 10, so on. And so that way we are spreading out the business, okay, between someone who maybe provides better service but has a little bit higher price. And so we spread out the business a little bit that way. But the greater percentage, typically in a paper example, would go to the lower price, just based on structure. We also sometimes do rotational. So they go first, second, third, and just keep rotating through. So those are typically the different methods. We can get into a whole lot of conversation that I was privy to in procurement modernization and challenging these ways, which
he loves to.
Which I really, really love too, but we'd be here a while. So, but yeah, we're always investigating different ways to challenge the status quo. Right now, rules and regulations, particularly around international trade agreements, is where we get stuck because our international trade agreement obligations, particularly NAFTA, which we may see turn into USMCA, is 30 years old. And so it's built from a pre-digital environment and doesn't allow us some flexibility. So we have some restrictions there. One of our biggest restrictions is actually our own Canadian free trade agreement. There's actually a free trade agreement amongst the provinces and territories. And that, for the federal level, is actually one of the most restrictive things that we deal with. Drives me crazy, but it is things that we keep putting forward that we hope will see change in the future, and that will allow us some more flexibility to do different things and be able to evaluate on some different criteria. Again, keeping the open, fair, and transparent as the
Same
primary.
thing when we talk about the provincial things, each province has its own designations, licensing, and how do you?
All right, we're going to segue. How's that?
Okay, that's good.
Right off of that.
Okay, but we'll get back to supplier arrangement.
We'll get back to supply arrangement in a moment.
Okay.
I just want to segue
In
to that
10
for
minutes.
just a moment. One of the things about multi-level procurement in Canada is, for the longest time, it was all extremely separated. Federal bought federal, provincial and territorial brought provincial and territorial, municipal bought municipal. End of story, all separate, done. About a year and a half ago, federal level changed our rules, and we created what's now we're referring to the Canadian Collaborative Procurement Initiative, which is allowing for multi-level government purchasing. Now, in saying so, because the most restrictive rules are at the federal level because of international trade agreement obligations, it really is opening up federal tools like paper, standing offer, to the provincial governments to be able to leverage and buy from that. So that instrument's now growing in the amount of end users. So it's not just going to be all Canadian federal government departments, but it's now provincial government departments as well as the MASH sector, municipal.
MASH stands for municipalities, academic institutions, schools, and hospitals.
Right. And so, thank you. So you never did that right.
Well, I like to have my bits.
And so that is going to, there's going to be a couple of big benefits to that. One is more end users using those tools means ultimately more business opportunities. And also should simplify the government procurement because it is essentially one place to go and be a vendor. If you are a paper supplier, you now really are going to get to hopefully we're going to get to a point where everyone's on board, because not everyone's there yet, but everyone's on board and buying from the same place to simplify. It'll open up the number of vendors. There'll probably be an increase in vendors because of the increase of volume, but consolidate that all into one place to simplify the procurement as well. So,
is everyone having fun? Oh yeah.
That's a good one. So, standing offers, we put it out there, we set the terms and conditions, we set all the pricing, it's repeat purchases, we just don't know how much we need and when, and once we set that tool up and we have the suppliers in there, we go and essentially make orders, and then it follows the contract as it's written. The next one's called a request for supply arrangement. This one is a little different. Okay, and this is one that we use where if there's going to be a change in the requirement, okay, so maybe it's a software application. And the software application can have all kinds of different means to it. Perhaps it's going to be one thing for one department, and another department's going to configure it differently. Maybe it's a consultant contract. The consultant's going to be 6 months with Canada Revenue Agency doing this software consulting, but then over here with Canada Border Services is going to be a 1.5 year contract, and it's going to be this version of the software. There's variables. The standing offer is when everything's set. Supply arrangement we use in order to be able to create essentially a qualified list of suppliers. Who are all the consultants in Edmonton that can work in Edmonton for the different departments for this software consulting? What we do is we create that list. There is no pricing involved, okay? It essentially takes care of the essential criteria. Can you do the job? Are you a registered supplier? Do you have the certifications that you need to have? And that gets all taken care of. Then the department comes along and says, oh, I need a software consultant. I need it for this, 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 and this. What that does is we put that out to the supply arrangement holders, the qualified list of suppliers, and that's when they bid on it. That's when the pricing becomes involved, okay? So what it does for the department is identifies a list of suppliers that are vetted. They're already qualified, they are in the list, and it reduces the amount of competition because that's already been done, okay? Because it goes to those pre-qualified suppliers. From there, this is where it's a two-step approach. We've done the vetting part first, and then the competition essentially happens second. Typically, it's going to come down to mostly on price because we've evaluated this already. It allows us to take care of the part first, and it reduces the timelines a little bit of when we actually go out for solicitation and the actual contract. Is the biggest difference between a request for proposal and going out through a supply arrangement the international trade agreements obligate us to post everything for a minimum of 40 days. There is exceptions, but it's a minimum of 40 days for almost everything we do to abide by those obligations. So it's challenging in a fast-paced world that we live in, and we want to go and get something really quickly. As soon as the trade agreements come involved, we have to post for 40 days, and it has to wait. And so we hear it all the time from businesses. Why does it take so long to do a contract? And maybe we need a contract for a new table that we don't ever have access to. We just, it's a new table. We need it. If we're going to go and do a contract for that, it's going to be 40 days minimum. And so that's where our process does get slowed down a little bit. The supply arrangement helps because it allows us to do that part up front, and then when we actually do the competition, we can do it a little bit quicker.
I think it's my favorite method of procurement.
It's pretty good. It does work. What do we got next?
Well, we can talk about special circumstances, or we can just take questions.
Can you go to RFI for a second? If you go to the buyandSell.gc, if you go to that website, okay, you'll see all these invitations to tenders, you'll see RFPs, you'll see all these different mechanisms of procurement. Another thing you will see on there is what we call an RFI, or request for information, okay? That is really us reaching out to the supplier community to say, help, we need your help, okay?
We don't know what we don't know.
And we do it fairly regularly. We do it because we want to know what you know in order to make our procurement the most efficient and most successful as possible. Yeah?
What's the difference between the procurement that you do for services as opposed to supplies? Is there a different approach that you take, or is it all the same?
Not really. We use the same tools. We just tend to use more of one tool. In services tend to use more supply arrangements because of the variables that are built into a services contract. Goods tends to use more standing offers. If neither of those are available, then it's a request for proposal, is the tendencies. But I was in the furniture division when I was living in Ottawa. I was in the furniture division, and we were converting things from standing offers to supply arrangements because of the flexibility we want to build into that program. But it's more tendencies than anything else. Good question. So we want to make sure, we want success, because the worst thing that for us that can happen, because it's so time and costly, okay, time and cost prohibitive. If we go out for solicitation and no one bids on it, or we go out for solicitation and people bid on it and no one passes, no one is awarded a contract because the minimums didn't make sense, or the evaluation criteria didn't make sense. I ran into this as a manager. We had one where it was a highly technical piece of equipment. The evaluation criteria, it simply got missed. The first half of the sentence made sense. The second half of the sentence made sense. They did not make sense together. So we had one company bid on the first half of the sentence, the other company bid on the second half of the sentence, but nobody could actually make the two work together. So it was a failed procurement, which cost the suppliers time. It cost the suppliers some money because of resources and such. It cost us time, and for the program of work that was to be completed, that got delayed as well. Okay? So there's two things to that. One, in a solicitation period, if you are ever looking at solicitation and you see something that does not make sense, please bring it up. Please contact the name that's on that solicitation to say this does not make sense. This needs to be revisited, because it only helps us, which we appreciate, but also helps the supplier community who's bidding on it to be successful. The request for information is designed to help us communicate better with the supplier community so that we avoid these areas. When I was in furniture, back to that example, when I was in furniture, oh man, furniture was wild. Anybody in furniture here? No, no, okay. I tell you, my first job with the government was right after the H1N1 experience and redoing the flu vaccine contracts, okay? Which when you totaled it all up was about $1 billion if you put all the options in place on behalf of all provinces and territories and all Canadians, and making sure we had access to vaccine and really science and da-da-da. And then after that was done, they said, okay, go to furniture. And it was like, oh my gosh, okay, furniture. And furniture, it was so much harder than vaccine. Like, vaccine is so regulated, and it's giving your drug identification number, and okay, you passed, yay. Furniture was like, oh man, it was just so many permutations and all this stuff. But so when we were developing our national strategy for furniture, we did a request for information. We put out what we wanted to do with the strategy. This is what we want to do. This is how we want to do it. Here's a whole list of questions. Can you please answer them for us? And then we offered them, the suppliers, we offered them one-on-one meetings and presentations to be able to give us that information. Because we're not in official solicitation, I was telling you earlier about the very restrictive communication. Because this is a request for information and there's no contracts on the line here, the communication is much easier. We have many more liberties to be able to have a real conversation. And I told them all. We had ended up with 32 meetings. Hour-and-a-half presentations by companies to tell us how they felt the strategy was and what it should be. And what I told them all was that because we were in this situation, if I have a question, I'm calling you. I'm not posting it publicly. I'm not translating it. I'm just going to call you, and we're going to talk about it. And that really helped us form our strategy in order to be able to make it successful, not only for ourselves, but for you. So if there is an RFI, a request for information, that's in the field that you work in, I know it's time consuming, and it's not easy as a small business owner or medium-sized business owner to always and be able to participate. But if you can take that time, it's certainly appreciated for us. And it gives you a bit of insight as well as to what we're looking for and what we're trying to achieve with our procurement.
And that brings up a good point, Chris, that, you know, bidding on federal contracts, like certainly we want everyone to be involved, but it's up to you as a business owner or a business person to decide whether bidding on these contracts or standing offers or supply arrangements is the right move for you. And we can help you at the Office of Small and Medium Enterprises to look at what, you know, if you need some help figuring out buy and sell or whether your good is truly being purchased, we can kind of help give you those tools. But ultimately it's up to you to decide whether you want to bid on these contracts, because it does take significant time and resources. It can have a big payoff, but that's a personal decision you have to make for your business. And just to kind of, I'll open it up to questions for Chris, because he really is the procurement expert. And well, though you may not believe it, we actually have fun Friday procurement talks every Friday.
You brought that up. Wow.
Well, yeah, where I ask questions about procurement, and since Chris has such a big background in it, he answers them for me. So that's a standing item in our calendars. But we do offer quite a number of different seminars, and we can also do workshops with people to, you know, get a group together with your laptops and register as a group and kind of navigate the buy and sell website all together. So if that's something that people are interested in, we can certainly put that together as a more hands-on workshop. You know, that's kind of our finding opportunities on buy and sell workshop. We also have a bidding on opportunities, how to put together a bid. There are, when it comes to defense and the Department of National Defense, there are some defense and security procurement specific topics that we can cover. Supplying professional services, so we just to narrow in on supplying services, and then also obtaining security clearance, because when it does come to certain contracts, particularly with the Department of National Defense, sometimes there are some security kind of barrier hoops that you have to jump through as well. There are some limitations in And, you know, there are a ton of other slides that we could have gone through, but we've taken almost an hour of your time, which we really appreciate. And we do want to answer your questions. So if you have general questions, by all means, ask us now. And if not, we'll be here to help as well. Oh.
If I can, just before the question.
Chris
just
has more to say.
I do. I did 20 years of motivational speaking in elementaries and high schools. I can get going and I'm sorry. But I just wanted to relate to something that you had said at the beginning around funding, okay? Our area is not funding, okay? It really is not. We're about the procurement. However, we do try and guide people to where the funding is. We don't have any, okay? I'd love to say I had some, I don't. And I have, our team and our department doesn't control any of the funding pots that are out there. But as part of the email that we can share a couple of tools these are based on what stage you're at with your business, depending on what you're looking for. So we'll share that. It's hard for us to speak to it because it's not our area, they're not our programs. So we try and guide people and refer to where those are. Changing a little bit for us because we're starting to help departments promote their programs. So we do one with D&D Ideas. It's a really neat program, so we can speak to that a little bit. But for the most part, we just try and refer to the tools that are out there for the funding purposes. Okay, I just want to make sure we touched on it because you brought it up. Okay, yes?
Yes, so in dealing with the government, right, what type of payment terms should I expect?
That was one of the slides
That
we
was a
did.
slide! And we just had a presentation this afternoon about it.
Well, the short answer is 30 days. Oh, good.
Yeah.
I'm sure Chris has a longer answer.
Yeah. So our terms and conditions, fundamental terms and conditions of the government, 30 days. There are examples in which we do extend that. Vaccines was a very good example because we buy on behalf of the provinces and territories. So we actually have to get the money from the province to then filter it through. So we extended the payment terms on that. There is a pilot program right now going on in which we are working on 15-day payments.
It's big news.
It's pretty exciting. In fact, it's so exciting they're not telling anybody about it. It's truly back office stuff. But the idea...
They're not even telling the suppliers. They're just
No.
seeing if they can do it and then get the payments out in 15 days.
So it is really a back office thing for us, but it truly was born out of trying to get more cash flow, particularly to small and medium enterprises. We're in a digital environment. The payment terms and conditions were probably designed when checks were still being written. So the idea is that we're trying to move ahead. It's a very small pilot that's happening in Ottawa right now. We're going to see hopefully expanded beyond our department and to others with the sole main reason to do it is for cash flow for small and medium enterprises who don't want to wait 30 days for a contract payment because, you know, you need it.
That's what it is. And then what happens after 30 days? They can charge us interest.
Yes, there is interest charges after 30 days if we don't pay after 30. That's for sure. We're also working on payment mechanisms. So where we're trying to expand the use of acquisition cards. So again, the payment becomes very quick. Yes, thank you. Yes. So yes, our credit cards. Procurement name, no words. And so we're trying to use those more as procurement methods as well, so that becomes the contract essentially. And we're trying to expand that because then the payment again is very much quicker.
We're just limiting it to 4 questions.
Okay.
So,
Excellent. I think that's someone over there.
4 questions. Okay, so what if you work for the government? Is there some kind of like an issue with conflict of interest?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not even going to expand on that. Yeah, it's 2 things. One, if you currently work for the federal government and there's contracting, absolutely, huge conflict of interest. If the person is a former public servant, that has its own set of criteria. There's its own contract terms and conditions based on former public servants, and that has to be disclosed, and there's all kinds of rules around that as well. Yes.
Just after the government, you have to be a Canadian citizen.
To
Sell to the government.
to sell to the government? No. Especially with our international trade agreement obligations, that opens it up to the trade agreement partners that we have. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a Canadian business. Okay. As soon as international trade agreements can become involved, it expands the reach of the procurement and it opens up the procurement further. There are times when if it's fundamentally, if it's over $25,000 and international trade agreements are not involved, then we can apply Canadian content. And we have different levels at which Canadian content apply based on the good or service that is available. Furniture gets essentially complicated because you've got parts being manufactured overseas that then get shipped, and then there's some assembly, and so there's this great wonderful formula that determines if it's a Canadian product or not, by how much it's been changed since its original state, and so depending on the industry, we will determine sort of what level is Canadian content in order to make sure there's enough competition. Because if we make it too restrictive, we can't, right? So that's kind of how that applies.
We hate failed procurement.
Yeah, we really do. We don't want them to fail at all. Yes.
Other than paper and furniture, what are like is there a quick product we can sell to the government?
Oh yeah.
You know what we should
Or
do is
sells.
ask people what they sell.
Sure. we can. We absolutely can. The searching in buy and sell, looking for quick things, the repetitive buys, is really around finding what are our standing offers. Because the standing offers are things that we typically buy a lot of. And so you're going to find office supplies. So whether paper's got its own, but then office supplies. So there's lists of 1,200, 1,500 items in there. Lab supplies is also a standing offer because the amount of laboratory supplies that are needed. We recently did one. We talked about the multi-level government purchasing. We did one for plumbing supplies in Manitoba. That is a region-wide one, but also allows the province of Manitoba to participate. So those are just a few off the top of my head. Food, we buy lots and lots of food, again, in a standing offer environment. So that's usually the best way to see.
It's better to ask what we don't buy.
We buy, we buy a lot of things. Not everything, we buy a lot of things. Great, yeah.
Yeah, apparently the buy and sell website is not currently working. Do you know anything about that or when it will be working?
Well, that's awesome timing.
Yeah. I've never seen that before, so we'll come over and check that out. Sure.
Yeah, it was working earlier this afternoon. I don't know if there's an update happening because, you know, it's later in the evening.
Could you blame it on the update?
Yeah, I'm going to do that. Yeah, it's Ottawa, you know. You know, they don't respect our time zone. I can say I'm from there. We'll go around this way.
Okay, so when you register actually, so in the registration process, it's industry specific, or like you can just register yourself as a general supplier and then you can bid on anything?
So it is industry specific. To when you register, you essentially register for the GSINs, is what they're called. Those are essentially industry categories that you can supply. Now, what that does, it helps you identify opportunities, okay, and it allows government to identify what you supply, but it does not restrict you from bidding on anything. I mean, if you can bid on it, you can bid on it. But from an awareness point of view, we ask for that in order so you and us are aware of what you're able to do.
First, that's a full circle back to the beginning of the presentation when we said why it's important to register as a supplier.
Yeah.
I think I know we're limited in questions, so maybe but this gentleman in the white had his hand up for a long time. Cream. So.
If someone is registered on the website, if a bidding comes up, will that person receive it automatically, or person need to go every time to check on the website to see if something is already posted?
it's best to check all the time.
Every day.
It's best to go and check. There are alerts available for existing solicitations, and there's a couple of mechanisms in which to do that. But ultimately, for new, it's not built that way. I know that we can get into a whole thing about electronic procurement and all that kind of stuff, which there's a future for that. But in the moment, it's more of a repeat search.
And there is one nice thing that you can search when you go to buy and sell. There is one button for new today.
Yes.
So you can narrow it down a little bit so that you can see what's new today. When
All
it's
right.
working.
I think we're getting. Yeah.
We just decided that they have to come back.
Hey!
And tell us some more. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna cut off questions, and then you can interact more one-on-one. They're here to take questions like individually too, like
I won't move.
well, or go talk.
Well, I would move closer to
Fair enough. We'll split.
Whoever's wanting to talk, and then also I'm going to read out some of our sponsors today, if that's okay.
And while you're pulling that up, I'll just mention that we do have some pamphlets for selling to the Government of Canada. A few little handouts on services and our cards for our general cards for the Office of Small and Medium Enterprise. If we run out, we will get, again, more materials, and we'll hopefully, if your email's not on the, we would love to be able to email everyone if everyone's okay with that.
Sure. Have a brochure?
Of course.
Yeah. Just take one.
Sure, we can pass them around here.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have enough. Oh, okay.
We'll find out.
We'll find
No,
out.
we'll get more.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
you can say no if you want.
our sponsors are the Africa Center, Aleph Partners, the North Edge Business Association, Diversity, Action for Healthy Communities, Micro Business Training Center, BizNet, of course, and the Downtown Business Association, Yagi Ambassadors, and Vinnie Constanzo. And there's one more here, but it's like on a mug.
So no accountant.
The accountant. Yes. If you need taxes, there you go. No, your taxes.
Thank you very much.
Our sponsors, and I'm with the Language and Culture Shop.
Yes. I'm sorry? We have some cards.
Oh, and one more.
Phone number and email.
Live Better Homes.
I'm actually based in Calgary.
AJ Aiden. He's a business development.
Robin's Edmonton, our head office.
You said that you wanted to go on